As I said at the beginning of my remarks, I think it's characteristic of all communist dictatorships that they try to rewrite the history. And it's interesting that the Chinese Communist Party have been particularly critical in the past of the Russian Communist Party. They thought that Mr. Gorbachev had made a mistake in not defending the role of Stalin and not actually trying to ensure that the communist view of the past was the one that prevailed in Russia. Similarly, I think they regard any attempt to tell the story of China and China's communist brutalities over the years, they regard any attempt to do that as what they call historical nihilism. What they think is that we should all believe their version of events. So, for example, as far as they're concerned, Tiananmen Square wasn't a massacre of students, wasn't a quick case of the People's Liberation Army shooting their own people. So I think we have to be very clear that you can't bury history. You can bury, as some previous Chinese emperors have done, you can bury the scholars, but you can't bury the facts. And people in Hong Kong know from their own experience that the overwhelming majority are themselves refugees from China or the family of refugees and descendants of refugees from China. Well, I think it's interesting that the young people, or some of the young people who led the Occupy Central movement and have been prominent among those who've been locked up after I'd left Hong Kong. So they don't depend on their understanding of the relationship between economic and political freedom on the British. They understand it themselves. They look around the world and they can see the difference between a society where there's, for example, due process and jury trials and open courts and a communist system where the law depends on whatever the Communist Party says. And I think they know the difference. And they know the difference between a newspaper like Apple Daily, which tries to tell the truth about the world, and newspapers like Ta Kung Pao and Wen Wei Po, which simply give the Communist Party's version. I think prediction is extremely difficult. What I believe is the things that define Hong Kong's sense of its own citizenship will outlast what underpins Leninist autocracy. So I think that the values of Hong Kong will survive.
321追新聞。